fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Star Wars has a very big problem with emotions.
If you can only express your emotions every 7 years, that ain't right. That just ain't right.
You have chosen a mental health panel? Instead of going someplace like, I don't know, the Eisners, which tells me one thing about all of you, and I love it. You all want to see something fun. These are reactions from people who have definitely been to the Eisners before. We do try to have a lot of fun. My name is Brian Ward. I am the co-host of a podcast called the Arkham Sessions. We basically take all of the favorite geeky film and television shows that you grew up on, and we try to boil down the psychological science out of it. We started a few years ago with every episode of Batman the Animated Series. We have since done Trek. We have done Wars. We have done, we just wrapped up HBO Max's first season of Harley Quinn. And now, Drea doesn't know that I'm about to announce this, but our listeners have decided in a vote that the next thing we're about to start covering is the first season of Disney's Gargoyles. So we will be taking out the psychology there and playing around with some cool stuff. Joining us, as always, is my co-host, the psychologist who does all of that heavy lifting. By day, she is a psychologist at UCLA. She's also an expert consultant for major studios. Warner Brothers, DC, Marvel, Lionsgate have all used her talents. Her latest publication is titled The Force Awakens, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Using Star Wars.
Impressive. Quite impressive.
It's pretty light reading before bed, it's fine. She is Dr. Drea Letamendi.
Yeah!
And she is obviously Team Star Wars. But over on the other side, Team Star Trek, we have another licensed psychologist who specializes in anxiety and stress, who's been seen on Netflix and HBO. You should absolutely check out his absolutely fantastic YouTube channel. He is Dr. Ali Mattu.
All right.
And as we always do, we always like to have two very special guests to help our psychologists fight this battle betwixt themselves. The whole idea is that these two people will have worked on these franchises, and I could not be more excited to introduce our guests tonight. Bouncing back to Team Wars, she is an actress, a director, a martial arts extraordinaire expert. She also portrays Morgan Elsbeth in Star Wars Ahsoka, The Mandalorian, and Star Wars Tales of the Empire. She is Ms. Diana Lee Inosanto.
For the Empire.
And this man really needs no introduction. He is an icon for anyone who loves science fiction in film and television. He was a Star Trek The Next Generation writer, wrote 2 of the movies as well, co-executive producer of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, showrunner for the Battlestar Galactica that we all know and love.
Yeah.
Outlander. For All Mankind, which is one of the best shows on TV. And as of this weekend, announced God of War. He is Mr. Ronald D. Moore. So before we get too in the weeds here, I want to make sure everyone is aware. Everyone on this panel loves both franchises. So don't take anything we say too seriously, too personally. Ali maybe loves Trek a little bit more than Wars. Drea might love Wars a little bit more than Trek, although we're working on that. But I'm also unbiased. So what we're going to do is we're going to start our questions. One of them we'll go to our psychologists first. We will bounce to them and then bounce to their partners for help. Before the panel, our psychologists flipped a coin.
Did you?
It was like a brain model, is what we flipped.
it was.
Okay.
Yeah. Drea, you actually won the coin toss. Are you deferring to Team Trek for the first?
No.
You
Why?
want to go first. All right.
Why? No.
All right.
We know we came first, so it's okay. We don't have
Oh, it's that kind of thing. Okay. All right.
So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to the first question, and guess what? It's about all of you. First impressions. Drea, if someone were to come up to you and say they want to get into science fiction, and they've been told that the two things they need to get into are Star Wars and Star Trek, how do you convince them that Star Wars is the gateway for connecting to fans of science fiction?
Okay. Well, it's no secret that Trek can be intimidating. Okay. So I just want to. I'll start by saying something nice about the fans of my lovely opponents here, in that as someone who's more recently, as an adult, getting into Trek, the fans are absolutely welcoming and so nice about it, and do not care that I started out knowing nothing. So, what a friendly, inclusive fandom. However, I do think that Trek storytelling can be intimidating. Where do I start? Who's connected to whom? Help me out. There was actually a panel last year at this convention that was all about how to get into Trek because fans did not know. So let me just say that. On the Star Wars side, I do believe that the stories are so connective. The first thing I'll say is that you can start anywhere, really, but it's helpful to say, all these stories are collectively about one big theme, one big story that connects together, and that it's okay if you start somewhere and you're like, wait, and you can tell, new fans, like, okay, you're learning about the Bendu, or you're learning about this particular character, you're learning about the Force for the first time. Remember when you saw, your first a clone trooper, you're going to see the way that they interconnect and the way that there's this connective tissue. But the second thing I'll say about that is the characters are just so relatable. So as soon as you dive into Star Wars, there's going to be a character that you feel emotionally, psychologically connected to. And as far as like media storytelling, that's the first thing that really needs to happen for us to feel a sense of what's called a mediated relationship, what used to be called like a parasocial relationship. That sense of like a real, relatable, connective, sense of validation, a sense of togetherness, a sense that this story can be about you.
Dr. Ali, Trek has none of that stuff, right?
Yeah, so let me, Dr. Drea, let me ask you a very simple question, because Star Wars is so easy to get into. What is the right order in which I should watch the Star Wars movies?
No, that's the thing.
Simple, right? You watch with the first one that came out. You watch the first one, which is episode 1. Do you watch the machete order? Star Wars is not that accessible, people. What I will say is we have a lot of Star Trek. We have hundreds of hours of more of it. So I grant you that there's a lot of points. There's a lot of points of entry. We're an inclusive people, us Trekkies, so I want to invite you in. Here's all you need to know about Star Trek. It is people from different backgrounds coming together to solve problems and try to do the right thing. That's it. Right? Thank you. And it is aspirational, which is why it is a little weird. Developing a relationship with these characters, they're not us. They're us in the future, evolved, having lived through World War III, trying to better themselves. So it is not as accessible as the farm boy on Tatooine. So you want to get into it, you watch Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, or you watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and you're in, and you're going to love it, and you're going to have a lot of fun.
Drea, you said a lot of nice things about the Trek fans. Are you going to do that from here on out? We're just, like now that the gauntlet's been thrown? Diana, what do you think?
Yeah, what do I think? Well, first of all, I mean, I became a Star Wars fan. Listen, I did start off, I'm in my 50s, so I started off being raised on Star Trek, but I will tell you, when I first saw Star Wars, and it wasn't called A New Hope, it was just Star Wars, but the moment I was in the theater, and it was in a town called Aspen, Colorado, it's not the Aspen we know today, but it was a small town, but the way Star Wars emotionally connected to audiences right away, because there were emotional patterns that all of us collectively can recognize and relate to, particularly in family dynamics. And I loved, for instance, when we get to The Empire Strikes Back, the father-son dynamic, and Luke, having to decide, am I going to be a rejection or a reflection of this man that I am now discovering is my father, and yet wrestling with the love that he has somewhere, but yet he knows that this is a toxic relationship, right? And he decides, I'm going to reject this, I'm going to be a force for good. And I think these are all patterns behaviorally we can all connect with. We know we all may have that dysfunctional family member, and we all had to work out those things, right? And I think that's why Star Wars is so popular worldwide. I will also say, from a fan perspective, I travel and I do Comic-Cons all over the world, and it is amazing. I will get 2, 3, sometimes 4 generations of family members. They come together and they all like different phases of the Star Wars universe, and yet it is a uniting force, and they get to talk about these issues. They get to talk about these stories. I also, as a mother, I have a son with autism. I also love how the autism world, the community, the disabled community loves connecting with it. They identify with this world. It's very intriguing. And I think George Lucas did a good job. He to express himself through hope and redemption. These are, I think, key things that we all can relate to. So that's what I think.
Ron, how about you? Tell me about the fans.
Well, I think it depends on how old somebody is, how emotionally old somebody is, for their gateway into either of these franchises. I came to Star Trek very young, in the 70s, and then saw Star Wars after I was already a Star Trek fan and fell in love with Star Wars. So obviously you can like both. I think that Star Wars has especially if you're starting at the beginning, which to me the beginning is New Hope, that's what we call it now, but it was Star Wars, is a more wide-eyed, idealistic, fairy tale. That's much easier as a gateway drug. You can go in, you get it, and I'm not using gateway drug disparagingly. Yeah. It's like, yes, I want more of that.
Sure.
The farm boy, the princess, the robot sidekicks, the bad guy in the big black cape. You totally get the movie. You can get it from a very, very young age. Star Trek asks something more of you. You have to think a little bit more, and it's a more complex idea. And I think at the beginning you can watch, like I did, Star Trek episodes and just enjoy the action adventure, especially in the original series, because the captain's fighting people all the time, and there's things blow up, and it's kind of fun. But show somebody Devil in the Dark as a kid. It's a monster show. There's a monster out there. The captain's going to find that monster and kill it. But by the end, it's a mother, and it has eggs, and the captain decides not to kill the monster, and that is like an aspirational idea. It's a complex idea, but I don't think it's an idea that is so beyond the grasp of a child that they can't understand it. And I think you show them that episode to begin with, it opens their mind to like, whoa, what is this? You know, what is this story about? What is this? What's this Federation? What's this Starfleet? Who are these people? Because that isn't what I was expecting, and I think that can bring people into the show.
100%. I want to ask our next panelist. We'll start with you, Dr. Mattu. Revenge versus restitution versus reinvention. Now, both Morgan Elsbeth and one of your favorite characters, Ron Worf, they come from devastated histories. Both of them had the chance to reclaim power, but they made radically different decisions about how to do so. Who's more justified in their decisions from what you know about moral injury, cultural allegiance, and these characters' specific histories with their people? Ali?
Oh, man. I'm beginning to wish Dr. Drea deferred and let us go first last round. This is a tough one. Okay, while I'm thinking, I'm going to stall for time and say I think the most important character in all of the Star Wars universe is Spock, followed by Worf. I think
The Trek universe, yes.
Did I say Star Wars?
You love us.
Everyone?
You
Did
love
you do a
Star
little Jedi
Wars.
mind trick on me? What was that, Dr. Drea?
He's
Jedi
fallen
mind
into the
trick.
trap. The whole panel's over. We know who won.
Man. Okay, Worf and moral injury. So it's really fascinating. So for those of you who don't know the story here, Worf is a sole survivor of a Romulan. They're the pointy-eared ones, but not the friendly ones. They attacked this Klingon base. He was a sole survivor. His family, minus his brother, that thanks to Ron Moore, we learn more about later. His brother survives, but he grows up with humans, and he's much later, thanks to Ron Moore as well, put in a situation where he can get revenge for what's happened to him, and it would come at the cost of a Klingon civil war. So the decision he makes. He's had moral injury upon injury upon injury. This idea of something that you believe so strongly in, that you're serving an institution, whether it's Starfleet or the Klingon Empire or the culture of Klingons, and that belief you have has been completely shattered. What do you do in that situation? And Worf had a choice of either getting revenge and it would destroy the Klingons, or he would take that upon himself. He would take the dishonor and move forward with that dishonor. And Worf, he's given that decision so many times. And then I love when he kills Gowron. Much later on, it's like, finally, God, nicely done, Worf. But in all of those situations, he chooses to take his own dishonor with the hope that he might work within these systems to repair it. And he's always critical. He's critical of Starfleet. He's critical of the Klingon Empire. He doesn't believe that they're all right, but he always wants to work within the system to find a way through. And I think he's one of the most courageous characters in all of Star Trek because he consistently does that. Now, what he didn't have to deal with is the genocide of his people. Dr. Drea.
Yeah, lovely. No, really, I always learn a lot from you about Trek. I definitely want to give Diana a chance to really talk about embodying this character, but Morgan Elsbeth is a very dynamic, powerful woman who is carrying the weight of her ancestors, metaphorically on her shoulders, and really trying to undo the wrongs of, like Dr. Ali said, the genocide of the Night Sister community. And also, there's some interesting things as far as identity goes, because does she make poor decisions? I think we can argue that under the pressure that she's in, with the Empire looming over her and Thrawn essentially taking control of her agency, she's had this history in her life where she knows the people with the power get to have control. The people with the power make the decisions in this universe. And so I want to justify her decision-making around, yes, she had to kind of grow into that role of being empowered, because if not, there's more death, more loss, more genocide, and erasure of of her culture. And I'm interested to hear more about what Diana has to say about this, but my understanding is that Morgan is also not necessarily a one-to-one cultural mapping of her ancestors, that she lived out an experience of being more of kind of a mixture of cultures, being human, and taking on the identity and the culture of her people. And I think for any of us here who, myself included, who is of mixed race, mixed identity, mixed culture, we are wrestling with, how do we fully represent ourselves and are fully seen as ourselves? And that wrestling can be, incredibly wrought with internal struggle and with difficulty and challenge. And I think the way that this character handles that is just really powerful and really relatable. And it's a tragic story
It
too.
is, yeah. Especially if you see Tales of the Empire, you get an understanding of the kind of trauma she experienced. And it's interesting the question that you asked, because normally if I do a podcast, they ask more the difference between Morgan Elsbeth and Ahsoka, but and so I kind of feel there's a parallelism between Ahsoka and Worf, because they both came from seeing horrible things that were going on, and especially in their younger years as she was coming up. And but getting back to Morgan, this character speaks to what trauma can do to an individual. And when I talked with Dave about the development of this character, she's had to learn to be a survivor, and she's had to learn to adapt to each phase of her life. And so becoming part of the machinery of the Empire, to me, was a part of that survival skill. And in a way, it's always been on some level about revenge and power, and by gaining that power, it's her way of kind of controlling her universe because of what happened. But if you've watched Ahsoka, then and sorry for any spoilers, the whole goal is to kind of create the return of her Dathomirian people. And so I just feel, when you think about even what we see in our world today, I think Dave did a beautiful job of mapping out this character, because there is some things that explain her rage, her trauma, and what can happen to the human condition when you are around these dark events in one's life, and how that is then later on portrayed. And unfortunately, if you've watched Ahsoka, it doesn't end quite well for Morgan. Whereas Ahsoka and somebody like Worf learned to be a survivor and turn it around and be a force and for good. And that's what I love about Morgan Elsbeth and the way the approach that Dave took. So that's
Great.
my thoughts about it.
Ron, tell me about Worf and reclaiming power after such devastating history.
Well, Worf is different, because Worf, unlike Spock, Spock is half Vulcan and half human. Worf is completely Klingon, but he's been raised on Earth by human parents. And Worf, always identified as a Klingon, had chosen to go into Starfleet and abide by its code and abide by the rules of Starfleet and what that meant. And there was always a conflict between his nature as a Klingon and what he knew of his heritage as a Klingon and the rules of Starfleet. But there was, what Worf cleaved to all the time was the idea of, he had given his word, he had taken an oath to do this. And that's a very Klingon thing, and once you've done that, you're bound by that oath. And Worf had taken an oath to Starfleet, and he was going to abide by that. But he never really had an identity question. He never really had a question of who he was. Like, he always, I am a Klingon. That was always first. I'm not human, I am a Klingon. But I have chosen to wear this uniform. And in the story, as it goes, there comes a point where he can't wear the uniform anymore and abide by his nature as a Klingon because of complicated family politics going on back in the Klingon homeworld, and he chooses to take off the uniform and take on the uniform of a Klingon. And then once he's over there, discovers that, the humans have really influenced me, and I am a little different than how I thought, and certain values I've picked up from them are not part of my Klingon heritage. Because the Klingons, whatever you may say, their culture and their society values certain things that the Federation and humanity felt were negative. They do value revenge. They do value, vengeance. They do value the blood oath. They value those things. They value the warrior ethos. That is really part and parcel of what it is to be Klingon. And Worf never disavows that, but he does value the human relationships he made on the Enterprise. He values and became willing to appreciate the ideals that the Federation had. So he was willing to give himself to that idea and never really deny who he was and the people that he came from.
Perfect. I want to ask our next question. Neurodiversity and neuroinclusion. Both Trek and Wars give us so many characters who struggle to fit into sort of the dominant mold, right? But whose differences become more essential? Why is your franchise more successful in portraying, representing, and celebrating neurodiversity? Drea.
There's a development over the course of decades for both of our favorite science fiction here, because I think in the history of media, androids and robots were kind of coded for those of us who are neurodivergent. And I do want to say and celebrate that as kind of a positive, diverse portrayal. I mean, a lot of us remember relating to 3PO, seeing that anxiousness, that rigidity, that nervousness if something doesn't go the way that you anticipate. And a lot of us related to 3PO, but that is a droid. And I think I love Data so much, and I relate to Data in so many different ways, and yet, I think I felt sometimes that, the same thing might happen to Data that happens to neurodivergent people, where there's expectations, like, well, you're supposed to be a genius and know everything, and it's like, no, that's not true. That's kind of a fallacy. The word we used for that was savant. We don't use that word anymore. And Data at times, I think, would also be infantilized, not by LaForge, but by some other characters who didn't quite understand Data. And so I want to name that Star Wars has really kind of like grown out of the droid is the other, and has included characters like Tech from Bad Batch. Tech, if you don't know about Tech, is a fantastic character who's a clone, and who just kind of is very direct, says what he means, doesn't necessarily know that others might see him differently or be offended by his directness, but quite utilized as a part of the team and seen not as different, but as skillful. And there's a building of strength. There's a lot of strengths there. I just want to quote what Tech has said in one of the episodes. I may process moments and thoughts differently, but it does not mean I feel any less than you. And I really just kind of like the complexity there. There are non-droid characters in Star Wars like KB, like Tech, and other characters from the animated shows that I think really go beyond that one-to-one mapping.
Ali.
Do you think Yoda is neurodivergent? I was just thinking about this as you were talking.
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Yoda's totally neurodivergent. This is a really weird thing to debate, like which franchise has the best representations of diversity, but here we go. It's Star Trek, because Spock, check. Data, yes. But I really appreciate what you said, Dr. Drea, about there's an evolution here. The character that I most related to, and I hated relating to him, was Barclay. I was a socially anxious kid. I was actually a selectively mute kid, which sounds like an X-Men superpower, but it just meant someone hit the mute button when I went outside my house. And Barclay acted so similarly to me. And even Captain Picard called him broccoli, accidentally. But it shows you just what the culture was on Enterprise. They kind of made fun of him, and at the same time there was those expectations. Like he literally became a supercomputer in an episode with the laser. However, let's move forward with the representation. We get Odo. there's the most neurodivergent experience is literally trying to mold yourself to fit in. Does that sound like anybody we know? That is Yoda's. Now I just combined. We have a super neurodivergent character. You take Yoda, you take Odo. That is Odo's entire story is of going from trying to move in. He does try to move in with the solid quite well, actually. But he tries to fit the mold, and his whole journey is about trying to fit in, trying to become his own thing. It gets complicated with the Dominion War and the changelings. And then we move forward in time, and we get to now, and we have Tilly, we have Rutherford, we have Boimler. What you see with these characters now is they're acting in many ways that we've seen with Data, with Broccoli, with Barkley. I am not getting the words out. It's Comic-Con after hours.
That is true.
But you see these characters acting in neurodivergent ways, and they're not excluded. They're not made fun of. They are part of the team, and that's what we need to be working towards, is that type of future where everyone's differences are celebrated, and like Star Trek does really well, is people with different backgrounds come together to work on a goal and move things forward. That's what these characters are doing now.
Diana, I know that this is something very close to your heart, so tell us what you think about neurodiversity in Star Wars.
In Star Wars, yeah. I mean, I think the way I see it is Star Wars does celebrate outsiders. I mean, obviously starting with the droids, C-3PO, R2-D2, I mean, but in some ways also the way of kind of learning, like with Grogu, right? Just, being able to process information very uniquely to the individual. I mean, there's not much I can contribute other than that I just feel that Star Wars has, in its own unique way, shown the spectrum. I mean, even I think about the intensity of how Luke Skywalker sometimes reacted, or even Rey, just how they're processing information could be interpreted as neurodivergent. I will say, though, I do love Star Trek. I love Data. I used to go to meetings for people with autism, and I loved at the time, when Next Generation was being broadcasted, people loved Data. I knew so many people in the autism community that really connected to this character, and I definitely see my son in Data, actually, and that's a beautiful thing, and I'm just so grateful that they had that character.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I see myself in Data, and my son sees himself in Data, in the sense of not understanding things that are happening around him, and the character is always questing to understand and tries to understand, but falls a little bit short, and yet he's still embraced as part of the crew. He's still part of the team. He's always trying to understand why he doesn't get the joke, or why he doesn't get, the sort of lingua franca of the Enterprise as they're hanging out in 10 forward, or the culture of the ship, and those things elude him. But he's always made to feel as part of them, and I think that's incredibly valuable. But it's also interesting to sort of posit a character that is on the outside of things, to sort of never quite understand and never be able to close the gap. It doesn't hold out an unrealistic idea that, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, you too can figure these things out. We did an episode in Next Gen where called In Theory, where Data got a girlfriend, and she was in love with Data, and we thought it was a fascinating story. What would it be like if Data was in a relationship, and he can be the perfect boyfriend? He can remember everything. He knows how to do these certain things. He's never going to say the wrong thing. He's going to be the perfect boyfriend. But there was a point when she had to realize that he couldn't love her, and it was heartbreaking. And at the end, it's like he just deletes it, and it was like, wow, and that's really who it is. So there was an acceptance within the show that even though you want certain things to be better, and you want certain things to close the gap, and you want to make it all good by the end of the story, some things don't change, and that's okay too. We can still love Data even though he can't love us. It was still kind of the message of the show.
And let's not forget, Data was fully functional. I want to go on to emotion regulation. What's more psychologically dangerous? So you're probably going to have to go after your opponent on this one. Suppressing your feelings like a Vulcan or feeding your rage like a Night Sister. Ali.
Vulcans don't suppress their feelings. Can we stop with this nonsense, folks? They have mastered their feelings. That is what Vulcans have done. And by the way, they spend every single day doing this. If you watch Voyager, Tuvok is always meditating. It's like he's like mornings are like 3 hours of mindfulness. That is all what they do. They spend their entire lives trying to understand emotion, trying to figure out what is the best way forward. Yes, there's a whole Ponfar thing. You know, they figured out that every 7 years you just gotta go for it. But it's not. They don't suppress. They've mastered. They figured out what works for them.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the question as written by Ali Mattu and Drea Letamendi. It's suppressed. That's what it's got here.
Star Wars, it seems like, to quote Yoda, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Star Wars has a very big problem with emotions. There are certain emotions that are totally up for grabs, and then the Jedi are like, no, you Jedi cannot know love, nor this, nor that. Just read the books, hold the laser sword, help people. Y'all need to figure out this emotion stuff. You could use a little bit of Vulcan philosophy.
Wow. I mean, I'm certainly not here to defend the Jedi guidance around how to manage emotions. I think the example was for the Night Sisters, which I think kind of sit between Jedi and Sith around how to utilize difficult feelings. But what I want to start with is by saying when I saw Star Trek, the motion picture, the original motion picture, I'm sorry, the movie 1, maybe? I don't know what it's called.
The motion picture.
I'm nervous. See, I'm so nervous. I'm not a good Star Trek fan. But I truly love that film around Spock's story because now it's decades old, but some spoilers here where they discover this alien superior intelligence, and the mission is to seek it out, and Spock is going through his own sort of identity development around I'm feeling things, and I believe Spock is comparing himself to this superior artificial intelligence that seems to be devoid of emotional intelligence, and he doesn't like it. Like Spock does not want to see himself as emotionless, and I think there are these like micro behaviors where he shows endearment and he shows love for his friends and the crew and a sense of exhilaration even, and I believe that it's a good example of how Spock manages the Vulcan culture. And I totally agree that it's not like the Vulcan people don't have emotions, but I do think that if you can only express your emotions every 7 years, that ain't right. That just ain't right.
Yeah.
And so briefly, what I'll say about the Night Sisters is that I think about the difference between rage and outrage. Rage is an inner brain responsive reactive emotion. It's usually about hate and anger. Outrage is a cognitively more intellectual experience around emotions, and it's about doing what's right. It's about recognizing injustice and undoing that injustice. And I think the Night Sisters they're adaptive, they're emotionally intelligent, and the Sith are reckless and handle emotions, I think, on one end of the extreme. And I think the Night Sisters are able to take what they have with their outrage and they build society, they build culture, they build tools. And yes, they're involved in combat and warfare using these tools and instruments in order to defend themselves. And I think that's really relatable, especially right now, around what do we do with these really challenging, difficult feelings that a lot of us have.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I never heard it put that way. Yeah, I mean, it just, I think Morgan Elsbeth in The Night Sisters, I mean, you're talking about a lot of pent-up rage and a lot of grief, and, and that just comes out in her having, to try to just survive, and, yeah, I do think, though, the approach, though, to The Night Sisters is a little bit more unhealthier in some ways, and it's projected out at other people when you don't know what to do with that rage. I mean, my gosh, she's been a conqueror of 100-something planets, and she's caused a lot of pain, a lot of outward pain to other people and other societies, and so I do think it's much more destructive if you don't know how to put that more constructively in place. That's my feeling about it.
But then those people use that pain very constructively later, I'm sure of it, right? All right. Ron, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting because Spock is, again, a unique character, and he is half human. So his grappling with human emotion, and especially in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which I think is a great story in that movie, is because he is half human. He is not a Vulcan, pure Vulcan, right? So it's a different journey, it's a different sense of identity, and Spock's revelation by the end of the motion picture is, V'ger couldn't feel this simple emotion when he holds Kirk's hand and Spock cries, and it's a big thing, because it's Spock realizing something about himself that's always been there. The Vulcans, though, as a planet, as a culture, as a race, were warlike in their deep past, had nearly destroyed themselves, and then had decided to follow a different path. Had said, we are going to try something else because this is so terrible and this is so awful. And logic and the mastery of emotion, allows us to be peaceful, allows us to sort of suddenly realize we don't have to kill each other and we don't have to destroy each other. And then they go out into the galaxy and they don't really proselytize. They're not out there like walking to people's doors and saying, hey, I'm Spock and I'm here with my book and I'd like you to... That's not who they are. They go out into the galaxy and they're like, that's who you are, the Klingons? That's cool. You do whatever. We're the Vulcans and we're doing it this way. And that's okay, and we're not going to kill you. We hope you don't kill us. And they just move on. And there's like a Zen quality to Vulcan, that I think Trek, kind of got away from in later years and starts to sort of, the temptation of the writers, just to be inside the show for a minute, is as soon as you have a character that can't express emotion, you want to I'm going to do the story where they express some emotion. So there's always this temptation to do the thing the character is not supposed to ever do. And then you get all these examples of why Vulcans are suddenly bubbling up with rage and so on. But philosophically, I think that the idea is they're not suppressing and denying their emotions. They are mastering them, and they are choosing a peaceful path, and they're choosing to think about the way the universe works in an orderly fashion in order to sort of, celebrate infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And I think that's IDIC is a wonderful philosophical construct that is kind of unique to Star Trek. It's the basis of an entire culture's philosophical idea, and it's one that I think that is very positive, and I think that that's what makes Star Trek very special.
I do find it fascinating. What was the one episode where it's, I believe, Spock's father and he's aging, and he hears music and he starts to cry.
Yeah.
You're dealing with, what happens to the aging Vulcan, and all of a sudden there's these emotions that come with the territory of what happens when it's coming close to, I guess, the final years of a Vulcan life. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you said, the emotion is there. It's just how they're choosing to deal with it. And then at a certain point in a certain state, and I think he had a particular condition as well.
Yes,
that suddenly he could control those things and how it was going to manifest. But it was also, Sarek is always this interesting character within the canon because he didn't marry a human woman.
Yeah.
And what was that about? And it's hard to even figure that out because in the original series, Journey to Babel is where we meet Sarek and Amanda for the first time. They dance around it a little bit. And all he can really say is, why did you marry it? It seemed the logical thing to do. It's a beautiful line, but man, you wonder what that courtship was. What is a courtship?
Yeah, that would have been an interesting thing to explore.
And it's a really interesting idea, and in some ways it's better as a mystery box because I don't know that I want to have that lined out.
He did it twice.
I'm fascinated by that, actually.
I am fascinated by it. I just don't know what the answer is to it. You know, I don't know how that worked.
He married a human woman twice because the first one died.
That's true.
Yeah. So I
He
mean,
had a type.
there's
That's
lot
all
to it.
right. Doesn't make him a bad person.
No. I'm just saying it's interesting.
I want to give everybody the opportunity to ask your own questions. We've got 10 minutes, so quick questions and quick answers so that we can get through as many as possible. We'll start at the front.
I'm curious, since both these franchises have spoofs, if you can debate briefly Spaceballs versus Galaxy Quest.
I will say in Galaxy Quest, the captain is crying in the bathroom, so he is letting in that emotion out.
I mean, Galaxy Quest so makes fun of Star Trek and also knows what we all love about it. And I haven't seen Spaceballs in a long time. I can't even comment. I can't even diss it. I don't remember it that much.
I mean, Spaceballs is a flat-out spoof, and it's
Yeah.
great and it's wonderful. But Galaxy Quest is a knowing, loving satire that you can embrace as a fan. It acknowledges the excesses of fandom, but it doesn't really make fun of them. It doesn't mock you for it. You can watch Galaxy Quest as a Star Trek fan, and at the end of it, you can applaud and cheer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the scene where like, he's trying to take
Superman.
Hi. Would the panel agree with the assertion that Star Wars has taken and learned the best from Star Trek and has pivoted to TV in the last several years, especially as most of the examples we've seen are from Star Wars TV, and thus more better delving into psychology of the characters than into the TV medium?
Wait, so say the question again?
Like, do you agree with the assertion that pivoting to TV helps Star Wars with psychologically developing its characters?
Oh,
Interesting.
that is fascinating. This is where I wish Dave Filoni was here.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly can't speak to whether or how it was intentional, but I do think that it's good to give access to more stories that way, and you also have a longer form of storytelling that for a lot of us, I can't believe I haven't talked about Andor yet, because Andor is one of my favorite series.
Right, Andor is incredible. Yeah.
You know, some people may say that Andor doesn't feel as much like Star Wars due to its content and its risk-taking and its storytelling, but I truly feel such a closeness, such a feeling of endearment around Andor and its storytelling. And I think that right now that kind of storytelling is much needed.
Yeah.
And I will say that that's something that Trek has actually been doing for a long time, is, taking us to these conflicts and to these conversations, difficult dialogue that needs to be had. And it's going to happen in space because we can't handle, our realities. But I truly think that's one thing, if we can say maybe that's one version of this that it's doing well. Yeah.
I kind of feel, I just have to say, I've always felt that at its heart, Star Trek is a television show and Star Wars is a feature. And not that they can't play in each other's sandboxes. Star Trek Wrath of Khan is one of the great science fiction movies ever. And Andor is a fantastic television series. But Star Trek at its heart is a television series. You can't do Data's Day or In Theory or Devil in the Dark or Amok Time as movies. You just can't. And that's what drew people to the franchise. And Star Wars is about sitting there watching the fucking Star Destroyer come over your head and being like, oh my God, and fight the Death Star and go down the trench and you're like, ah! And, that's not television, guys. You want to sit in a giant theater and experience that with hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And I think at their heart, that's where they kind of belong. But they can kind of play in each other's backyard every once in a while.
Absolutely.
All right, another question in the blue shirt. Sorry.
What does it say about each franchise and their fan bases that both franchises deal so much with orphans and found family? I mean, if you look at Next Gen, almost the majority of them on that ship come from broken or absent, family structures, and they find each other there. Over in Star Wars, you've got Luke, Leia, Ahsoka. I mean, the two twins of the Acolyte.
Yeah.
All these people have these terrible, or lapsed families, but they have to find someone. Either they get thrust into them or they claw to get them themselves. What do you make of that in terms of the franchises or the people who love them.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. That's the one thing I do love about Star Trek and Star Wars is all of a sudden that you have these people that come together and now you have a self-made family, you know, and I think that's, again, another reason why people connect to these franchises. So, I mean, you see that with Ahsoka and Ezra having, you know, being brought into this family with Hera and, and Kane. It's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I love both movies here, but which one's better? Generations or The Last Jedi?
They're apples and oranges.
Boy.
They're apples and oranges, in my opinion, because
You
I
know,
think Star Wars.
based on who's on the panel, I'm going to say Generations for sure.
I'm not even sure I would
question
say
about
that.
Apples and oranges, because I think Star Wars connects emotionally with people, whereas Star Trek is very cerebral and philosophical. You know, they're just, to me, apples and oranges.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a request here. One of my favorite text conversations I ever had with Dr. Drea was about generations. And she had the most beautiful thing to say about the Nexus. Do you remember what you said?
I may have been elaborating on Brian's theory about
Oh, let's not
Picard.
talk about my theory.
Was it that?
What's your theory, Brian? What's your theory?
Let's not do it. Not right here. Not right here. Not right now.
You had this beautiful statement about it was about time and what we want, and it was other stuff. I mean, I was still getting over the fact of how much you love Generations, but do you remember?
I do remember when I saw it for the first time, because again, I'm new to Trek, and Brian and I watched the first 6 movies in that collection, and then went on to Generations because he said you really need to continue on. And I do remember being moved by this concept of being in this dimension, in this place, this dream where all of your needs, your unmet needs are fulfilled, and you have this kind of sense of, true, I think the actualization of that, like in psychology we call it like actualization, which really is a myth, but it's something that it's uniquely human that we strive for. But I think I may, and I think I texted you several times about watching this movie, but that it may have been too much like a fantasy. Like there was a sense of what more is there? What is as humans can we continue to feel we need something to live for? But I can't remember the actual text, but that's what I remember feeling from the film.
I think the clear answer to your question is Generations.
I want to go to. Oh, I saw a hand over here. Yeah.
Yeah. Which series do you think is more critical of the institutions, Star Wars Jedi's or the Star Trek Federation?
Critical of it.
I'm going to take the first stab at this, and the clear answer to this is the winner here is Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars started as a story critiquing institutions that were failing in the 1970s. And Star Trek has yet to really critique the Federation and some of the imperialist sides and the hegemony of the Federation. There's a lot of things there that we could really critique. I think the closest we get to that is Deep Space Nine. And I think TNG is this utopian future when things are easy, and Deep Space Nine takes all those values, and what are you going to do now when everything is challenged? When there is war, Section 31 is going to come out. Section 31 is going to do some stuff, and how do we feel about this? In the Pale Moonlight, I have weird, yes, let's give it up to one of the best episodes of Star Trek. And it is, I think it gets closest to doing what you're talking about, but I think Star Wars did it with Star Wars, and it just did it again with Andor, and it made the most social commentary, most relevant social commentary of our time with Andor. So I think you win.
Well, that being said, I've been told that we now have to wrap it up, but I do have to throw it out to the crowd. You've now heard both arguments. Where are my team wars? Who won this debate? going to do it one more time, and I want whatever's playing back here, I want them to be like, why are they so loud in there? Team Wars. Team Trek. If you've ever seen this panel before, it should go no surprise. God, this seems like a tie to me. But a fun one. I want to ask the folks where they can find you online or your upcoming projects, where you can be found on the floor. We'll start with Ali.
If you like psychology, mental health stuff, just go to YouTube and search for Dr. Ali, and you'll find me. DRALI.
I have no real presence online, so you can find me here at the con if you run into me, and that's about it.
Look for God of War on Amazon.
God of War,
coming.
look for God of War on Amazon coming. Well, not soon, but
Can we get a release date for next season of For All Mankind? No. Okay. Let me ask a much easier.
Not that kind of panel, Ali.
Much easier question. I'm going to ask the man that killed Captain Kirk and Starbuck, Ed Baldwin. He's going down this season. Blaze of Glory.
Like I'm going to give that away? Come on.
It's an easy question. I tried.
Diana?
You can find me on Instagram, the real Diana Lee Inosanto. You can find me. I just joined Blue Sky recently.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Twitter, Facebook, but mainly Instagram.
Drea?
A couple things. My website is drdreapsychology.com, so I have some content there, articles. I like to give psychology away for free, so a lot of what I've written is on there. Then my Instagram is at Dr. Drea Psychology. If you happen to be here on Sunday, I want to shout out to my SDCC shrinks. We have a panel on Sunday at noon at the Shiley. So make it out there if you can. And lastly, it's the Arkham Sessions. That's the podcast that Brian and I have together. This summer is the summer of sci-fi, so we're covering, I just watched 2001: A Space Odyssey and did sort of a psychologist reacts to that. Wow. And we've got some fun sci-fi movies coming up for our coverage this summer.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Have the most wonderful Comic-Con. Love you all. Have a great night.